Hey guys, this is a position I encountered recently when playing against the computer program Quackle, and I wanted to make a video on it since the solution involves a concept that's fairly rare in actual games, but when it does come up, it can be really satisfying to find it, and it's definitely counterintuitive and worth knowing. So without further ado, let's dive right into this position. As you can see, I'm up a decent number of points. I'm up 86, and there are 8 tiles unseen in this pool, as I can see on the top right part of my screen. So what this means is there are 7 tiles on Quackle's rack, and a single tile still remaining in the bag. So the game is definitely starting to wind down. We're in what I would call the pre-endgame phase, where there's a small number of tiles in the bag, but it's not fully empty, in which case it would be a full-on endgame. So what I need to think about here is I've got a good lead, and how, if at all, might I lose it? How could Quackle potentially steal this game from me in the pre-endgame or the endgame? Now, with a lead as large as 86, the one I have, the main threat I should probably be worried about is Quackle bingoing. And I see there are some pretty good bingo tiles in this pool, right? There's an E, there's an N, an S, several T's. And I also see there's this Z, which is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, I'm happy to see the Z, because it's going to be more difficult for Quackle to bingo with it. But on the other hand, I'm not happy to see the Z, because any bingos that potentially do use the Z are going to score a lot of points, because it's a 10-point tile. And I also have to worry about the possibility of myself drawing the Z, and then Quackle bingoing out and catching me with 20 points from having the unplayed Z on my rack. So the Z is definitely going to be a thorn in my side as I look to figure out what my best play is in this position. Now, the first thing I want to ask myself when I start diving into this board is where, if anywhere, is Quackle threatening to bingo with this unseen pool? There's a couple lanes that jump out at me. The first one I'm probably going to look at are the possibilities of a 7-letter word on either side of the G over here, since this is really the only realistic place any 7-letter words could fit on this board. The left-hand side I can dispose of very quickly, since the only 2-letter word ending in a G is AG, and there's no A's unseen. And on the right-hand side, it's a little bit trickier because there are 2 I's unseen for GI, and also potentially an E unseen for YE. But that would require a 7-letter word ending in I or ending in IE, neither of which are very common, and it's not that hard to glean from this pool that neither of those are going to be possible. So I can dispose of both of these lanes pretty easily. However, that's not the case for the bingo line down here on the bottom row stemming from this E and jive. Because what I notice is if the Z is in the bag, then with the remaining tiles, Quackle is threatening to bingo with the word entities from that E. And not only that, there's also an N up here in the word nada, and in a similar situation, when the Z is in the bag, Quackle's threatening to bingo out with tiniest through that N. So I have a big problem here, namely that if I draw the Z, I can't stop Quackle from bingoing, because he has 2 separate spots to bingo with the same tiles on different quadrants of the board, and there's no way for me to make a play that's nearly long enough to block both of them at once. I can easily block either one of them, but then he'll just bingo in the other spot and potentially win the game. So the next question I should ask myself, now that I know Quackle is going to bingo if the Z is in the bag, is there any way for me to still ensure I score enough points to win if I draw the Z? Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is probably making a play down at the bottom of the board, because entities does still score 7 more points than tiniest. So one play I might think about is PE right here, because it scores 18 points, which is pretty decent, and it gets rid of a P, which is one of my higher point tiles, which I don't want to get caught with, and it does block entities on the bottom row. So let's see what happens if I play PE. Now, of course, I know if Quackle has the Z in this position, he's not going to bingo, and I'll be perfectly fine. But if he were to have the Z, then the threat I have to worry about, as was mentioned before, is an out bingo of tiniest through this N and nada. And it turns out, if this happens and then Quackle gets the 38 points from my remaining 6 tiles, he's going to actually win the game by 4 points. So this is not good for me. So at this point, I want to sort of look past the possibility of PE and think if there's any other ways that I could score enough points to overcome a potential out bingo. Now, one other possibility that looks potentially promising is the word uneven here, because this also scores 18 points, but gets rid of several more tiles than PE does, so I'll be leaving myself with fewer points on my rack for him to add to his score after bingoing out. And it's worth noting there are no possible bingos through this U that this play gives Quackle, as well as through this V. So once again, the only possibility I would have to worry about is this bingo of entities on the bottom, should I draw the Z. And unfortunately, entities, as I mentioned, scores those 7 key points more than tiniest. So while I got rid of more tiles, the 7 extra points are going to still propel Quackle to a 3-point victory after he gets the value from my 3 tiles. So this is starting to look a little discouraging, but after I saw uneven, then I looked right below it and I was like, oh, hey, I can play Geneva to this A, which scores a couple more points and also gets rid of my G instead of my U, which will leave me fewer points on my rack in the end. So this looked very promising at first, but then I quickly realized that this play has a big problem. So I'll pause the video for a couple seconds and we'll see if anybody can identify what the problem is with this play. So if anybody found it, nice job. And the key to note here is we've been very fixated on the possibility of me drawing the Z, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to draw the Z. In fact, there's only a 1 in 8 chance I'll draw the Z out of this pool of unseen tiles. And the drawing the Z is perfectly fine for me here, because if I draw the Z, then, as we've been discussing, he'll bingo out with entities, and in this case, it won't be enough for him. I'll still win the game by 5. However, if I don't draw the Z, if I draw one of the 2 T's, I'm going to lose in very painful fashion here, because Quackle is going to triple out with Zingiest for 212 points, clearly winning the game by a large margin. So this will actually happen 2/8 of the time, or a quarter, because there are 2 T's unseen. So this is even worse than the plays that only lose when I draw the Z, because now I'm actually losing 2 out of 8 draws as opposed to 1 out of 8. So this is a very poor play in this position. And as it turns out, there's actually no play I can make on this board that guarantees that I win should I draw the Z. And I can confirm that by asking Quackle's championship player to find what it believes are its best moves in this position. And as soon as it comes up, you'll see that all of its choices, or all of its top choices, do win this 87.50% number of the time. And that's equal to 7 out of 8. The reason being, as we've been discussing, that if I draw the Z, which happens 1 out of 8 times, then I will lose to an out bingo of entities. So all of these plays, Vega is very similar to uneven. They have the same idea that we looked at. They'll get me close, but after Quackle's out bingo, I'll fall just short. So the question now I have to ask myself is, okay, does that mean I have to just concede that if I draw the Z, I'm going to lose the game? It very much seems like the answer might be yes. But as it turns out, there's a sneaky tactic I have that guarantees I win even if I draw the Z. And the solution, as counterintuitive as it sounds, is passing my turn and scoring 0 points. So this seems bizarre, right? I have several ways to score 15, 18 points. Why would I want to score 0? And the main idea here is I really can't afford to draw the Z, as I've deduced from my previous analysis. So I want to, if I'm going to allow Quackle to bingo, I want to force Quackle to draw the Z so that he'll have to deal with it rather than me getting saddled with it and him gaining 20 points from my having it. So that's really the key point, is trying to avoid the z, and not only that, trying to avoid an out bingo. If he bingos, I'd rather he bingo now, so that there's still a tile in the bag for him to draw, and I'll get another turn to dispose of some more of my tiles. So let's take a look at this in action. It's worth pointing out that Quackle, of course, cannot pass back, because at that point I'll just continue to pass, and if the game ends in a 6-pass scenario where both of us pass 3 times each, then we'll each subtract the point value from our rack, and I'll win very comfortably given my 86-point lead. So if I pass, Quackle has to make a play. And if Quackle bingos immediately with entities, for instance, then I know Quackle's going to draw the Z, because that was the one additional tile remaining in the bag. But it's very different here, because entities is not an out bingo, and I now have another turn I can make. Not only that, Quackle has the Z, and Quackle's only spot for it is next to this A in Nada, playing ZA. So I can do basically anything that blocks that A. Even something as simple as PA is going to win this game, because Quackle is now stuck with the Z. And Quackle is going to be forced to pass, and I can sort of just play off one tile at a time now. Of course, being careful not to inadvertently give Quackle a spot, but this is a very simple endgame for me to now win with Quackle being stuck with the Z. I won't go through the details here, but this should be a fairly simple victory. And nothing changes if he bingos with Tiniest instead of entities. In fact, in this case, he even blocks his own Z spot next to Nada, so I don't even have to worry about sticking him with the Z, and I'm going to win that endgame very easily. Now, the one thing I do have to think about if I pass is, what if he already has the Z? And he can't bingo in this case, but what he could potentially do is play off the Z and then try to fish for a bingo. So, as I mentioned, there's only one place he could potentially fish off the Z, and that's to play ZA right here. So, now this looks bad, right? I've sort of gotten myself into a similar situation as before. He's going to have 2 places to bingo, and he has all 7 tiles, so while the bag is empty, I can't block both places, and he's going to get to bingo out. But the catch here is that ZA has blocked his lane for Tiniest, right? NZ and IZ are, of course, not valid, so he now has no way to bingo with Tiniest through this N. So in this case, all I actually have to do is block entities. So now my earlier play of PE is perfectly sound, and Quackle is going to have no way to bingo, and I'll win this game very easily in the endgame. So it's worth keeping in mind that if this ZA fish was somewhere else on the board and didn't block one of his 2 bingo lines, then I might have run into some issues after passing, and it might not have been the best play. So everything sort of worked together. All the stars kind of aligned here for me to pass, since he couldn't fish off the Z in a good way, right, without blocking one of his bingo lines. And any bingo he made was going to leave himself stuck with the Z if he didn't already have the Z. So that's sort of the idea here behind passing. It seems very counterintuitive at first, but hopefully diving into the different scenarios here helped it make a little bit more sense. It's something that, like I said, doesn't come up often, but it's definitely something to watch out for in these type of positions where you're worried about an out bingo and there's a high point tile or a tile maybe like a V in some situations that's difficult to play, and you're worried about drawing it. This is a very common scenario when passing does come up. There's a few others that I'll maybe go through in similar videos, but I think that about wraps up all the analysis I wanted to go through here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you ever get the pleasure of using this tactic in a game, feel free to post that in the comment section. I always love seeing examples of this tactic in actual games. So yeah, hope this was helpful, and definitely let me know any feedback or any sort of similar scenarios you'd like to see. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.